Santa Rosa had a sewer system which produced effluent which went into the Russian River.
At the time, there was actually quite a bit of distrust of the city of Santa Rosa because of the 1985 spill in the Russian River.
This all came to a head in the year 1987 when there was a very unusual storm in the wintertime, and the city, because its effluent ponds were full, was required to release a large amount of treated effluent directly into the tributaries to the Russian River.
And that's how they ended up going to tertiary treatment and then looking at what could they do with this water.
Primary treatment, secondary treatment, and tertiary treatment. Each level is a higher level of treatment. Our former director, Miles Ferris, one day at a public meeting had some in a pitcher of water and drank it to prove how clean it was. When we had the Russian River Discharge Alternative Forum, there were about 300 people in attendance from the general Russian River area at the Finley Center where we held them, and they packed the house because they were so adamant that they did not want this to happen.
And at that time, the city embarked on a program of trying to get its effluent out of the river and used for more beneficial purposes.
I was tasked in 1988 with coming up with a solution to the city's wastewater disposal problem.
And at that time, the geysers wasn't even an idea. There were about 132 alternatives in the environmental review process.
And I think most of us on the city council and the board thought we would expand agricultural irrigation.
The geysers seemed like the dark horse, right? The crazy idea that they would never do.
The production level of the geysers had dropped significantly from when I first arrived in '84.
The steam was running out. We have a lot of heat down there, but not enough water to produce the steam to go through the turbines.
So we need to replace all that steam, all that mass, and put it back into the ground. So that's where the Santa Rosa Recharge project comes in.
And we eventually selected the Geysers Pipeline project as the solution to the problem.
The geysers went to the city and said we could use the water in the geothermal reservoir to recharge the steam supply and basically give a use for the water instead of just disposing it in the river or the ocean.
I remember the first time anyone brought up us going to the geysers. I laughed out loud. It was like, are you kidding me? Going 41 miles from our treatment plant and taking water the places that it had to go. I mean, we went under the Russian River twice. They dug tunnels. I actually got to go down into it and then pump it 3,000 feet up into a geothermal field. It's like, really, you're kidding, right?
The environmental community and the stakeholders saw that, wow, it's an interesting idea. It was kind of bizarre at the time.
This alternative came forward because the private company said, we can use your water, in fact, we need it, and we're willing to contribute.
And that changed the equation of the cost of the project.
So when you were comparing the environmental impacts and the cost together, if you said, wow, the lowest environmental impact project wouldn't cost any more than any other project choice, it became an easy decision for the city.
So the idea to have a pipeline go 42 miles through 3 jurisdictions became an idea that was plausible, politically plausible to the electeds at that time and to the general public.
You have to think about this. This was in the mid-90s. Nobody was talking about climate protection at that point. Nobody was really talking green energy. It was just a place that provided power. And yet here was somebody willing to not only put money into it to make the thing work so that they could receive the water, they wanted us. And that was such a different paradigm than we'd been experienced that all of us, the City Council and the Board of Public Utility members all went, wow, we're going to have to really look at this seriously.
And I remember the public meeting when I think it was Doug Hackley stood up and said that then Unocal was willing to construct the in-steam field portion of the project. And that was breathtaking, because that meant that the cost to the city and the ratepayers dropped significantly and made the Geysers project the most feasible and environmentally beneficial alternative.
At that point, we all felt that now we have a project that will work. Up until then, I think everybody was skeptical. But when they came forward with money and with long-term agreements, then I think everybody agreed we had a good project. In 1998, we actually started design of the Geysers Recharge Project.
It was a long, long process.
People were not welcoming to this project. Treated wastewater, this is somehow bad, it shouldn't go by my house. Even if it's in a pipe, it might leak. 24 separate lawsuits against the city that my office had to deal with and defend.
We had so many public hearings, and they were very contentious. People in the Russian River felt very strongly about you're bringing your effluent into our river and going to contaminate it. And of course, the truth is we actually made the quality of the Russian River better because of the quality of the water that we were discharging into it. You had people in the winery industry and ag that wanted the water or didn't want the water, and it got unruly. So when someone leaves office as the chairman, or in this case the mayor, you usually get your gavel. And this is the gavel that I got, and I hope you can get a view of this, because very few get the kind of action that this one did during public hearings.
Almost every large public project is done through bonds, and the bonding companies and the rating agencies will not go ahead with the bonds as long as there's pending litigation. Dan Carlson went to Sacramento and found loans that funded 100% of this project. We were able to go ahead and build that project without being stopped.
We knew we couldn't build the whole thing at once, and so we split it into various pieces, and we put the first piece out between election cycles so that we could have it awarded and have a piece of pipe in the ground before it went into a next election cycle where people get elected and say, well, maybe we should study it some more, maybe we should think of some other things, or maybe it's too expensive. We over-designed certain elements of it and to make sure that it should last for at least 100 years. So most public works projects are not designed as a 100-year project. Literally, we did not want to have to put anybody through what we were going through again.
When we started, we really didn't know what the route would be. Did a lot of work to find the best way to get from the Llano treatment plant, the Laguna treatment plant on Llano Road, all the way up to the Geysers.
We had a huge drilling device that was known as Big Stan, and we actually drilled down and then under the river, far below the riverbed.
The concept of tunneling, micro-tunneling, had been developed and had been used, not for very long, but there were experts out there. We were able to contract with them, and they were able to put the pits on each side of the river and bore the pipe through. The one distance is 600 feet, the other one's 400 feet. They've set up their laser on one side, and if the pipe came through within 1 inch of exactly where it was supposed to be, which is pretty remarkable when you're looking at you're 80 feet below the bed of the river. And going through what could be solid rock or whatever.
There's a lot of risk in big projects. An early decision that was made by the city of Santa Rosa that made a huge difference in the project was that they decided that they were willing to build the pipeline in a patchwork fashion. So even if they didn't know, for instance, how they were going to get through the city of Healdsburg, which was a big challenge, they knew the route to the south and they knew the route to the north, and they were willing to begin construction in those areas and trust that they would be willing to connect up the dots.
Many of those alignments were challenging and controversial. Probably one of the most challenging pieces was a section that went across the Audubon Sanctuary. It's a very pristine piece of property that was owned by the Audubon Society. A lot of trails and wildlife, and certainly birds in viewing. So they had several concerns about the project, and in fact challenged the project alignment, thinking that there should be another way that the pipeline should go. I hiked up and down that mountain with Audubon Society members for about a year over 5 or 6 different alignments.
And we entered into an agreement with the Audubon Society in which we gave the Society $1 million for their and for conservation purposes, and in exchange we're able to put the pipeline through their area, and of course it was buried and doesn't impact the area.
Really a good example about engaging with the local community, working with the environmental community, and ending up with a solution that in the end everybody accepted as the superior alternative. We crossed some earthquake faults, so pipeline had to be designed to withstand those earthquake faults. So there are actually seismic joints in the pipeline that can withstand movement across the fault, and valves and electronics on each side of the fault that actually can measure when an earthquake's occurring and shut the pipeline down automatically.
The Geysers pump stations, there are 4 of them. And the first pump station is down on Llano Road, and the water is pumped from there all the way up to north of Healdsburg by that one pumping station, and that's a pretty long distance. Then the 3 pump stations on the hill, each one pumps the water up about 1,000 feet. And the pressure of the water just after the pump station is really high. And so the construction that was necessary was something a little different than what you usually see in municipal water projects. It was much more of an industrial project, but on a very large scale. Industrial pipelines are not often 30 inches in diameter.
Okay, the pumps inside, the pumps and motors inside are 1,000 horsepower, and each pump is rated for 4 million gallons a day. So in the system as a whole, with 5 of them, we have 2 of them that are VFD, we have 3 of them that are fixed speed. The system in itself can be adjusted for different flow rates.
The surge that happens in that pipeline can get the pressures in the line up to close to 1,000 psi. And designing for the surge pressures was a challenge, and then constructing the system to withstand those surges. The danger comes in testing and operating the system. And so you have large surge tanks that take the water and reduce the overall pressure of the surge. And the first time we tested those surge tanks, it was pretty exciting. We had modeled the results beforehand and had done a computer model and anticipated what the pressure would be over what time. So what happens is you shut the system off, the wave of water stops suddenly, and you get a force of energy back. And we were very pleased to see that what actually happened looked a whole lot like what the computer model had predicted.
We had to relocate families because they couldn't get in and out of their houses. So we would relocate a handful of people to other places for a year or 2. Could you imagine?
One of the things we were really sensitive to is being good partners and good neighbors.
Construction was going on through the Alexander Valley, and here we had a construction crew going through it during harvest, and the road was torn up, and we were like, what are we going to do? You know, how are we going to allow people to visit wineries and also have the grape trucks get to the vineyards to crush the grapes? The construction crews were giving, I believe, 15 minutes that they could block the road at a time. And we had stopwatches, so we were able to track it all the way through. And if they delayed a grape truck, that grape truck company or the vineyard would get $1,500. Sure, a few times they had to pay, but for the most part, we got all those grapes in, so that was good. The fact that the city was willing to do that for that industry showed a lot about, you know, they understood that there were impacts, and we needed to respect the winery industry, the vineyard the vineyards, especially during harvest. It's so important to our region.
I think we ended up making a whole lot more friends than anybody ever thought we would.
What makes geothermal special is it's high enough in the surface of the earth that we can actually tap into it. A normal geothermal well is 10,000 feet. Normally we have to drill about 20,000 feet anywhere else just to get to the hot stuff. But here at the geysers, we only need to tap into 4,000 feet to about 10,000 feet to get the hot stuff.
We had to show that we had the ability to take that water and pump it into the steam field, and that it would produce the power, the steam to power our plants.
Once that water comes over the hill and comes down at us, and we've contracted from Santa Rosa to take that water, then we have to figure out where it's going and how to make it get there.
So every geothermal field has two types of wells. One is the production well right here, and the other is the injection well. Geothermal is a renewable energy resource. So here we have the Santa Rosa system coming from the High Point tank and getting distributed to this well up here and getting injected into the ground. The water that gets injected into the ground, it takes time for it to boil and percolate in the reservoir, and then it gets produced back into this well over here, the production well, where it gets shipped over to this series of pipes to the steam line over here and ends up in a power plant over there. So as you can see, geothermal energy is a renewable energy resource because what we put out, we put back in, and it's all steam, it's all water, and it's all clean energy.
When we inject water into the subsurface, one of the consequences of that is that we do have what's called induced seismicity. The cool water hits the hot rock, and we get thermal contraction, which causes reactivation of existing fractures, and we have some low-level seismicity that results from it. We use that. That's the nice thing about the work that's been going on in the past few years. Not only are we making an effort to mitigate seismicity at the geysers through a better understanding of the subsurface and all the statistics surrounding the water injection versus the seismicity, we're also getting a better understanding of the subsurface structure by using the patterns within the seismic data.
Today we're probably putting around 20 million gallons a day into the ground. If it was raining, it'd be more like 40 or 50 million gallons. And that's one of our biggest challenges, is getting rid of the rainwater.
When we're in a drought like we have been in the past couple of years, managing that's interesting and it's difficult. Yeah, as people use less water goes down the drain, which means less water gets treated, which affects all these different uses. The drought primarily affects the volume of water that we can send up the mountain to the geysers. So it's a true cooperative partnership we have with Calpine, because we have to work together. We have to understand each other's constraints, but also try to help each other through the tough times, so reduction in flows, if they have issues on their end, such as the fire. That was another big one. The fire up there that damaged a lot of their facilities, we were able to hold that water back, use our storage, and allow them time to rebuild. And so we work together. When we have a lack of water, they work with us to reduce their need, and when they have the lack of ability to take the water, we work with them to store it.
I've been in this business a long time. Projects do come along that you consider opportunities of a lifetime, I guess. And being part of this project will be something that I was able to do as a part of my career as an engineer that makes a big difference in the community, and something that I cherish, as having had the opportunity to work on something like this. So it was a project of a lifetime.
People look to us as leaders in reuse across the state and also across the country, and even worldwide. People have come from other countries to view this system and how it operates and how it works.
Looking back now, years later, the Geysers project is probably the greenest project in Sonoma County. If you think about it, it takes this highly treated wastewater from several cities in the sub-regional system and turns it into electricity for 100,000 households in the Bay Area.
I was very leery the day we cut the ribbon because everybody wants to pat everybody on the back and say we've done it, it's done, and on and on and on. And as an engineer, my feeling is you need to wait. You need to wait, and I felt 10 years. And I always said, well, come see me in 10 years and let's see if everybody still thinks it's a good project, because that's the testament as did it work and is it still working the way you wanted it to. And I think after what's now 12 years since it started, not only has it been successful, but it's been expanded.
In the public sector, when you do public projects, sometimes you can look back and say, that was a good project, we did good, or we probably could have done a little bit better if we'd studied a little bit more. To me, the Geysers project's a grand slam. I mean, it does it all. I mean, it's recognized worldwide. Today it's beyond our expectations. It's now supplying enough electricity power for 125,000 homes.
You know, looking back, it has really fulfilled its promise and has worked very reliably and provided green power.
It stabilized the steam field, and the Geysers steam field is still the largest producing energy geothermal program in the world.
Something that people on a day-to-day basis don't understand, won't notice, won't observe, which makes a project even greater, you know, in my mind.
Is it something I'm proud of as an elected official, public official? Probably the thing I take greatest pride in.